Welcome to Zen Money Monday, weekly conversations with innovators, thought leaders, and entrepreneurial junkies about building good businesses, exploring what the idea of Zen money really means, and how to achieve it. With your host, author, business strategist, and Zen Money CFO, Liz LaJoy.
Welcome back to Zen Money Monday. Today, we are going to talk about this little thing that drives so many people bonkers when they're building their business, when they're taking it to the next level, and that is called pricing. It's amazing how much this wonks us out, and it has to do with the psychological idea that we're putting ourselves out there, especially if you are a service provider. It's a little bit easier to hide behind a product. But if you're a service provider in particular, it's an area that causes extreme emotional distress sometimes. It should be easy to think through the math that says, I need to make X dollars a month in my business, and I can work with Y number of clients, and I can spend X number of, I guess this would be Z number of hours. Therefore, here's what my pricing needs to be. Today, I want to talk about why it's a great idea to move ourselves away from dollars for hours pricing structures, which comes from a very long, rich history in the professional services world, how we can think about setting our pricing to make sure that your business is secure, and ultimately how we can set ourselves up successfully by reviewing this regularly and making sure we're not leaving dollars on the table. So first and foremost, if you're like many people I know in the online space or out of it, and you have recently come into this sphere where you're now asking people for money and you didn't necessarily have to do it before, or you've been doing it for a while, but this is an area that keeps hanging you up, then we need to talk about how you're visioning your pricing and how it can help you. I think a lot of us shy away from it because the numbers as we plan for them often feel like they're unreachable, right? We can put it all down on a spreadsheet or write it down in a notebook and it sounds great. I'll work with 10 new clients a month and I will charge them each $3,000 and that will bring in 30 grand into my business every month and I will be sitting pretty. That sounds wonderful, but the reality is sometimes it's hard to ask people for $3,000 for your time, at least initially. Sometimes we have months where we only book 2 new people. So instead of $30,000, we have $6,000 coming in. Or maybe that $30,000 is actually booked, but they're going to pay it out over the next few months so that the cash isn't in. We'll talk about that in future episodes, but for now, the pricing thing that really gnarls quite a lot of us up has a lot to do with our sense of self. And there are people out there who have a mindset where they're in business to be in business. They almost don't really care what business they're in. They're very comfortable talking about how much things should be valued at, how much their services should be valued at. They want to make money. They can drive the numbers appropriately. And then you have another maybe 50% of the small business population who are really committed to doing good work. Not that the other people aren't, but it's just a distinction in our mentality where because we are our business, there is an emotional piece to the pricing conversation. So I want to dig into this a little bit to help you disentangle that emotional connection if it's something that's an issue for you. But before I do that, I just want to tell you a story about a client that I worked with a few years ago. This was a woman who was very successful in the technical writing field. She was a freelancer. She had worked for herself for years and years, over 20 years by the time we started working together. And she was always feeling like she never had enough money coming in. She was really concerned about the fact that she was working so many hours and she was in an industry that traditionally paid dollars for hours. And she was working, and there was never enough money and she always was behind and there was debt that was continued to creep up and up. And one of the very first things we talked about was how she was pricing herself. And she really didn't want to have this conversation because she had a story in her head that she couldn't raise her prices. It turned out that she had not raised her prices in 17 years. I just want you to sit with that for a second because I think it's a really common thing, especially if you're by yourself. You know, you're not necessarily having to keep other people's mouths fed and therefore looking a little more closely at your numbers that we do as our businesses grow. She was in a position where she could have exchanged her expertise for extra dollars, but hadn't thought to do so. And there was a lot of concern that she was going to lose out on work if she raised her prices. And we talked through this as we worked together over several weeks. And I really encouraged her to not think about it as I'm going to ask everybody. I'm just going to start with one client client, because she worked with many different companies, I encouraged her to just start with one that she felt like if, the work went away from that company, it wasn't going to be a major shift for her. It wasn't going to be a major drain, and to just play around with asking for more money. And it was an amazing turnaround for her because she asked, the people loved her work. They came back and said, of course, of course you have more experience, therefore you can get things done more quickly. Therefore, we shouldn't pay you less than we pay somebody who's just getting into this game. Like, everybody understands this concept that you pay more for higher quality, you pay more for experience, and yet sometimes we forget to ask. So if you're in this position, just take a minute and look at where you're at now compared to where you were at when you started. If you can, and I'm sure you can, validly claim that you are doing better work now than you were in the beginning, then you should consider increasing your prices. And again, this was all in the realm of dollars for hours, which really isn't the ideal way to position ourselves if we can get away from it. I'll talk about that in a second. But just to close out the outcome of this story, so she did this with one client, had great results. She did it with another one, had great results. I don't think anybody said that they couldn't go up to the next level, except maybe one really big client who had, structures in place. And what we talked through was she made a decision to keep working with them, but only under certain parameters, and knowing that she was going to focus most of her attention in terms of new jobs on these other places that were happy to pay her. So if you've got people who are pushing back on your pricing, it's also a great opportunity to ask yourself if they are your ideal client, and are there alternatives out there for people who are ecstatic to work with you with your new prices. So that's one version of how looking at your pricing regularly and consistently can really make a difference in your business. A lot of times businesses will, at least at the end of the year, take a look at, and this is really great in the budgeting process, take a look at where their prices need to shift, especially again, if you have, a rate sheet that you put out there as a photographer, for example. Let's make sure that the dollars coming in are actually covering what you need in your business and what you need for yourself. So at least annually, let's take a look. Common rule of thumb is at least 3 to 4% increase just to cover inflation. So back to this example, if you go 17 years without raising your prices, you are losing a lot of money just in terms of the value of the dollar. And it doesn't have to be really complicated math here. We just look at what do we need to earn within our business to make sure that we're taken care of. And so there are two different ways to think about your pricing if you're modeling for yourself. We have top-down pricing, which is really looking at, okay, how much do I need to make a month? How much do I need to make a year? And then we'll adjust our pricing according to, the number of people that I can work with. And a lot of times we do this kind of by the seat of our pants, where we're thinking, okay, I'm going to work with 6 people a month at $2,500 each. So that's $15,000 a month coming in the door. Sounds great. But let's double check that math against bottom-up pricing, where we think about it on the other side of the financial equation, which is instead of looking at income minus expenses equals profit. And again, that profit number is where we get to play with how much you can take home. So top-down pricing says $15,000 a month. I'm going to learn how to live within that. Bottom-up pricing says, all right, I need X amount for myself. I want to make sure that I have X amount for the business. What does that mean in terms of how much I need to bring in? And then we figure out pricing accordingly. So for example, you want to be able to take home $5,000 from your business. There's another $5,000 that you spend regularly within your business to keep the lights on. I'm just using really easy math here. So in theory, we need to generate $10,000 a month to cover those two things, right? Except, of course, we don't want to forget about taxes, because it is a valid part of our life, and we want to make sure it's covered, because that's part of our Zen money equation, is making sure that all areas of our financial world are taken care of. So let's say it's a 30% tax set aside. That may seem high, but again, and I've talked about this in other places, if we don't spend it all on taxes, then it's a secret bucket for retirement or for other things. So let's say it's 30% right off the gate. We take $10,000, we divide it by 0.7, because we're saying that $10,000 equals 70% of what we want, because we want that extra 30% right off the top to set aside. So really we need to be earning $14,000 and some change. So we'll call it $14,500 a month to equal $5,000 in your pocket consistently, right? That's the version of bottom-up pricing structure. So let's say it's $14,500 and you work with people on average at, say, $2,500 a month, we're going to want to bring in, on average, 6 people a month. Right? 6 people a month is actually 15K, but you get how the math can work out for you. So now what do we do with that? What happens if some months we bring in 2 people and some months we bring in 12 people? If it averages out, then at the end of the year, you're good. If we can set up a cash buffer for you, this all works. But if it doesn't work, if that isn't enough, and let's say you're setting your prices where you're really only bringing in 4 people a month, but we still need $15,000, well, then we need to look at adjusting your pricing. And this is where things get a little squirrely because people will say, hey, I can't afford to ask that much. The market won't bear it. Well, I'd ask you to ask yourself if that's really true. The reality is if you're doing solid, good work, there probably are people out there that you can find. So we want to gauge ourselves against the market and against our own ability and experience for sure. But we also just don't want to get stuck in the scared place of, I can't raise my prices because no one will come. Well, guess what? If we never try, we'll never know. And this is an area where, again, bear brain comes in because we think it has to be everything all the time. If I increase my prices, it's going to have to be for everyone, every single person I talk to. I have to post it on my website. It's not true. Pricing, we can play here, actually. And when we do, it's amazing what we find. So think about the next person you talk to. And again, I'm using an example of if you're a service provider and assuming that you're talking to people face to face in one way or another. If you're doing this at a greater scale, if you're putting out a big launch and people are clicking to work with you and you're not necessarily interacting with them on the front end, it might be a little bit different, but you can still check the market against this by just taking the next person you talk to and offering them a slightly higher price. So let's say you've gotten really comfortable asking for $2,500 to work with somebody for 2 months, right? And that's a place where you're comfortable. Amazing. If you want to make more money or you need to make more money, the next person you talk to, see what they say at 3. If that feels scary, try $2,750. And you can ease yourself into the comfort level of asking for more money. The goal here isn't to set pricing and just continue to increase and increase and increase and not offer value, of course. We want our pricing to be commensurate with what somebody is getting for an outcome, but it's a great way to kind of trick our brain instead of being in this fear mode of, I can't ask people for $5,000 when I've been asking $2,500. We can just work our way up. The next person gets $3,000. The next person gets offered $3,250 once you're really comfortable. Those people aren't talking to each other. They don't know what you've offered. And if it comes back and somebody gets really upset about it, you can honestly say that you're building your business and your prices are increasing accordingly. There's nothing wrong with that. But for some reason, we think, one, everybody sees and knows what's going on in our head or behind the scenes in our business, which is not true. Nobody's paying attention, really. And 2, you need to do this for your business. So if we're not able to ask for the amount of money that we need, if that's really a block for you, if that's really, you really feel you can't ask for higher prices because you're boxed out of a market. I've had people ask this question too, and they have legitimately said people will not pay more than X. Then we've got to look at what's happening in your business in terms of your spend and how much you really need to live on, right? So if we can't ask for more, then we either need to learn how to work with more people or sell more things so that more money is coming in at that price that we've set for ourselves. We need to spend less money or we need to take less out for ourselves. Those are all versions of navigating the financial equation that can be successful or it can feel not so successful. It can feel not great. But if you can control these numbers and not have them control you, ultimately you're going to find your sweet spot. So we can always, if we can't work with more people, but we need more money, then we need to be able to increase our prices or figure out a way to have additional revenue streams. This is where people really love the idea of having sales that happen while they sleep overnight, having some kind of funnel so that people are coming in and you make something once and you sell it a bunch of times. That sounds wonderful. Not as easy to implement as it may sound, but certainly worth a try if you're looking to, generate higher dollars. Let's wrap back a little bit around the idea of dollars for hours, though. One thing that often happens is we get into this idea that we need to have a set price for an hour of our service. This comes again from the old professional service model. It's a slippery slope. However, because we start thinking of our value compared to that as well. And the minute you start talking hours, this incredible thing happens with our clients. So if I put a contract together and say that I'm working hourly with someone, and I estimate that the work is going to take between $3,000 and $4,000, I'll just random numbers. Here's what happens in the prospective client's head. First of all, they look at that and they immediately start to second guess the value. And whether they have any experience in bookkeeping cleanup or financial work or the value of having, high level strategic planning support, they immediately say, I'm sure I could do it more quickly, even though they have no experience here. It's just what happens to our brain. It's not our client's fault. They're not intending to belittle us or to think less of our value. It just automatically happens when we sell our time for dollars. And so I would encourage you to, if you're in this boat and feel like you can't get out of it, I would argue that you absolutely can. I know plenty of people who are attorneys, who are accountants, who are medical professionals, who are starting to move toward a flat fee basis because that version keeps us and our clients in the mindset of dollars for value versus dollars for hours. And therefore, you're never in the race to the bottom, lowest common denominator wins. So if someone's trying to pit you against somebody else saying they can do it more cheaply for less time, ask yourself if you want to be in that race with that person, first of all. And secondly, you can let your clients know the value of doing it for flat fee. So if you have a retainer option, for example, I would much rather know exactly what I'm going to pay month over month and know that no matter what, my needs are getting met and I'm not going to have to wonder if next month I'm going to have to pay $1,000 to somebody versus $500 this month. That's where offering some version of flat fee that makes sure you're taken care of on the upsides and the downsides, right? We give a little, we get a little, but either way, very clear what we're asking people to pay us is really can be a win-win if we're priced appropriately. And so when we have those down months where we have to spend some extra time, we're happy to spend it because we've picked it up maybe in some other months where the work wasn't quite as extensive. Hopefully that all makes sense. But the idea here around pricing is to find a fit that feels good for you and to review it regularly to make sure that you're not leaving money on the table. And then finally, I know I'm going on here for a little bit, but finally, I want you to think about making sure that your various offers are cohesive. I've seen a lot of times where our pricing structure can throw a curveball to a prospective client. They're liking what they're hearing, they're thinking about working with us, and then all of a sudden they look and they say, well, you're offering something for really cheap at the, this low end, small ticket thing. And then you jump really quickly to thousands and thousands of dollars. There seems like there's a disconnect there. And the goal is it's kind of like watching a movie. You want your prospective clients to be fully engaged with you at every tier. So those tiers, we don't want them to sit back and go, oh, wait, I'm watching a movie, right? We don't want them to question, oh boy, what's happening here? I can't see the cohesiveness between point A and point B. So just think about your pricing from that perspective as well. Are we taking clients on a positive journey or are we giving them reason to pause and say, ooh, is this really the right person to work with? Now, that's not to say that our clients don't have free will and shouldn't ask that question anyway. It's a whole other conversation. But I think part of our job is to make sure that our numbers and our pricing make sense to our prospective clients. And that's going to feel good for them and it's going to make sense for you within your business as well. And then finally, let's talk about pricing. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but often there's put out there, especially in the online space, this idea that we have sort of a pricing pyramid. And I have this visually actually in the workshop series where, lower dollars or maybe free things, getting that out in front of more people. And then some of them say yes, and they work with you kind of at the next level for the next level of money. And then so on up to the peak where you're really working at high level VIP, best level service for greater dollars. So that's all well and good. Sounds like a lovely way to work with people, especially if you're kind of taking them from point A to point B. But there should be a direct inversion of energy to that pyramid. So we should have an upside down pyramid where you spend more energy and time with those top tier clients. And one thing that I see happening is that people price accordingly and sometimes quite extravagantly at those top tiers, but they're not giving those clients really the VIP access. They intend to, but they get distracted by other things in their business. And so then you leave with people who thought greatly about you. And then as they moved up your funnel pricing wise, they all of a sudden got disenchanted because they didn't have your attention in the way they expected, combined with the amount of money that they were spending. So consider where you're spending your time and energy within that pricing pyramid and make sure that you're really giving people what they're paying for. I hope this is a helpful way to think about pricing. Remember again, your basic financial equation. Make sure that you're double checking any top-down pricing decisions with bottom-up pricing structure. So if somebody's giving you a model, make sure that it's going to work for you in your business. Only you know what your actual expenses are. Only you know exactly how much you need bare minimum minimum to take home to cover your household expenses and your living. And if we can get all of the numbers aligned there, it's going to be way easier to ask for those prices that you need because you're well aware that you can't take less, or you're well aware that you have bigger goals and therefore you want to raise your prices so that you can have more dollars coming in to do new projects, things like that. This is where paying attention to our numbers can really, really help us, and we don't leave money on the table. If you want to talk more about pricing pyramids and get some good visuals, join us for the brand new free Zen Money Mastery Workshop series. All you have to do to enroll is go to zenmoneymap.com/workshop, and that will get you started with some nice, short, easy to absorb workshops with some exercises that are going to help you leverage all of this a little bit more. And stay tuned for our next podcast. We are going to be talking about the other side of the pricing structure, which is paying yourself. I know this is an area that we all want to talk about, so we're going to dive into that in our next episode. Stay tuned. Hope you guys have a great day.